Chapter 25, Mother. Part 2. The first winter storm rolled in unexpectedly over the wooded hills from the north, following a day of golden sun and the last harvest of corn. Johnny didn't have time to put the garden to bed. He woke in the dark to the wind howling and the shutters slamming against the upstairs windows. In the morning, the fire had blown out and the wind was whirling circles of snow and hurling darts of ice against the windows. The garden could not be seen, and the dress Mother had hung on the clothesline the day before had vanished. 7 days later, Mother got sick and took to her bed. "Don't fuss over me, Johnny. It's been like this for a spell. In the winter I fade. It really wasn't you that saved me. It just happens." Her words angered him. "It was me, Mother. If I had not come, you would have died. It was already spring and you were barely breathing." She reached over and patted his hand. "You were a good son. You did well. But there is a time for everything. This time is mine." In the days that followed, it was all he could do to keep the house warm. The storm did not let up, and the garden lay hidden under a blanket of snow. The chicken pen had blown over. He found one hen huddled in the woodshed. The rest were gone. He brought the hen in the house. Mother rose from the bed, her face in terror. "Take her out, quickly! A chicken in the house disturbs the south wind." "Mother, we need her. We need food. Surely you still don't believe those foolish superstitions?" "They aren't foolish. Those are the words of Borderbinder. This is how we have lived in plenty so long." "There was no Borderbinder. He was a myth." "Don't say that, Johnny. Don't say that. I can't die knowing that's how you feel." She rolled back into the bed and turned her face to the wall. Her voice was weak. She kept saying it over and over. "Don't say that. Don't say that." After that, they quarreled incessantly. Although she was weak with illness, Mother's will was still strong. They did not quarrel about small things as they had done before he first left home. Now everything was on the table. The borders of the known world were crumbling. He commanded her to tell him, why had everyone left Aberdeen to work the mills of Stubblefield, and why was there a lock on her door? "Because I have no more neighbors," she said, "and there have been black coats on these roads." "There, you see? Your rituals have done nothing to stop what's coming. The black coats are descendants of the bandits. They bring chaos and cruelty into the known world." "The black coats are not bandits," she retorted. "The black coats are just rascals who weren't raised right. Their mischief is petty. The blackcoats are the servants of chaos and cruelty. I know. I killed one of them. And now, look at this storm coming down from the north. They've even changed the weather. Your borders won't stop it. Don't give in to gloom, Johnny. Honor the 4 directions. You will be safe." Her protestations never lasted long, though. Her efforts weakened her, and she would take to her bed. Then Johnny would go down and sit in the parlor, his thoughts dark and clouded. Why was he telling her these things? She had provoked him. It would be better if she didn't even know. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he hadn't saved her. And perhaps now she would die in spite of his attempts to save her. Everything in its place and everything in its time. It would be better for her to die content with her illusions. But he had shattered them. It would have been better if he hadn't even told her. Once, he tried to explain to her about Freeland. Freeland is our only hope. They follow a path truer than border binders. They do not try to seal the known world in. They expand outward, slowly, slowly. If there was a battle, they would lose. The only thing they have on their side is time. She did not raise an argument to this. Perhaps she didn't understand it. For a long time she lay so still, he thought she was sleeping. But then she spoke. "Your father willed his own departure," she said. It took Johnny a while to connect this thread. It had been so long ago. "I'm not so sure I believe that. He was killed by fire." "It doesn't matter how. It is possible to will your own departure." Then she fell asleep, leaving him speechless, perched on the brink of a great mystery. On the coldest day of winter, Mother refused to eat. Johnny pleaded with her. "You owe it to me, Mother. I don't care what you say. I came back and saved your life." "All the more reason, son. How could I leave this world with the thought of never seeing you again?" He contemplated the things she loved the most. He used the last of the precious wheat flour to make her a stack of salted pancakes slathered with the honey he'd stolen from the hive in the woods. She waved it away. "You eat that, Johnny. You need keep your strength up. There's still work for you to do." She asked for tea. He brought her a brew of strong chicory, and she spat it out. "I said tea, not blood. Something thin to moisten my tongue." He brought her a brew of dried linden flowers with a half-spoon of honey. She spat this out too. "No sweetness, Johnny, just tea." He told her he would stop eating then too. If she did not change her mind, they would die together. "No, you won't, Johnny. This isn't your time. Very soon you will realize that." And he knew she was right. Even then, he ate the pancakes. And on the nights after that, he always fixed a supper, dished it out onto 2 plates, and took it to her bedside, where he ate one and she refused the other. One evening, after Johnny had finished his portion of cabbage and grits and set the plate on the end table, Mother rolled over and reached out and placed a bony hand on his knee. When she spoke, it was only a whisper, a mere sibilance. He had to lean his ear to her lips to hear the words. "You're a good boy. You'll grow up and be strong. You'll plant your seed. Death isn't the end of everything, Johnny. It's just the end of you. If you've planted a seed, this shouldn't bother you. I can go now. I've planted a seed. You are the seed I planted. Johnny Arcane." When the moon rose full, it had been 10 days. On that night, he entered her room and found her wide awake and staring wide-eyed at the moon shadows on the wall. He rushed to her and stroked her face. She was burning with fever. She recoiled from his touch and began to thrash and tie herself in the bed sheets. He ran downstairs and returned with a damp cloth from the kitchen. She screamed when it touched her forehead, and she threw it across the room. She sat up on the bed, then stood screaming and collapsed on the floor. He scooped her up and lifted her back to the bed while she wriggled in his arms like a newborn goat. When she spoke, her voice was as dry as a grasshopper's. "It hurts," she rasped. "It hurts so much, Johnny." "Where? Where does it hurt?" "Everywhere. It hurts here." She folded her arms and closed them across her chest. I didn't know it would be so hard to die." She began to cough convulsively, grasping the bed frame while her body rose and fell. She urinated, drenching her thin cotton nightgown. When he rolled her over to pull the soaked sheets out from under her, she began beating her head against the wall so hard the curtain rod slipped from the window and a film of blood appeared on the plaster. It was then that he remembered the messenger's vial he had given to Mars Daniel just before he died. He had carried it so many days he had forgotten it until the time came when it was needed. Oh, why didn't he have it now? Mysteriously, the thought seemed to have the effect of the medicine. Mother turned from the wall. She calmed. She lay on her back, her eyes closed, breathing heavily, rapidly, then slower. Her hand released their clutched fists and opened into petals, and the pain seemed to drain out of her fingers. Soon there were moments of stillness between the out-breath and the in-breath, each moment a little longer than the one before. Johnny sat. He took her hand. He marveled at these silences, so empty and yet so deep. And then she would draw another breath. Something like color would spread across her face, and she smiled slightly, like someone savoring some wonderful food. This breath, this miracle of life. And she crossed its summit and fell back into silence. The silences grew so long, many times he thought this would be the last. But then again another draft would rise, another taste of what was departing, given back to stillness, another moment of waiting. The morning sun was just breaking into a cold, cloudless sky when Mother surrendered her final breath. On the first night after his mother's death, Johnny heard the winter wolves howling on the ridge, reminding him he couldn't take her outside in the snow, and in the house she would begin to decay. So the next day he tore down the hen house and used the boards to build a sturdy box that no wolves could defile. He dressed Mother in a clean cotton dress and carried her outside in his arms. He sealed her in the box and dragged it to a sheltered place behind the woodshed. Winter slowly released her icy grip. Johnny did what he needed to do to keep himself alive and alert. He stoked the fire, prepared himself meals from the stores that remained. He melted a can of resin and patched the crack in the parlor window. He nailed down the loose shutterboards and braced up the sagging drain pipe. He went through Mother's things. She had very little. The kitchen supplies, the tools, a few vases for flowers, the barn nails and the shells and the charcoal for games. In her closet hung 5 dresses. The dresser drawer held some clean and neatly folded quilts, and underneath the quilts, in its envelope with the broken wax seal, the letter the messenger had brought from Father foretelling his death. The rains came. The snow melted, and the ruins of the garden revealed themselves. On the first clear day, he walked up to the top of Gravestone Hill and tested the soil. Yes, it was ready. He dug a deep hole in the shade of an elm, away from the stones of Huxley, Vermilion, and Rug Chomper, so not to disturb their bones. But the next day it rained again, and the grave filled with water. He had to wait 5 more days to complete his task. On a morning when the sky was eggshell blue and the crocuses were nosing up around the woodshed, he pried the lid off the wooden box. Inside was what looked like a cornhusk doll with a porcelain face, and she weighed nothing when he lifted her. He hefted her over his shoulder like a sleeping child and carried her effortlessly to the top of Gravestone Hill. All the while, the emotion hovered in the sky above the event, a swirling vapor that would not descend into his heart. He lowered her into the grave, caressed her cold face, straightened her collar, and then climbed out. It was when he began shoveling that it entered and passed through him. A flight of butterflies, perhaps, or very tiny birds, or maybe just the substance of sorrow without form. Descending, piercing his shoulders, through his arms, and into each portion of earth, covering the remnant of his bloodline, his mother. He wept clean tears, almost saltless. And when the ground was level, he sat on the grave and wept himself clean. All the sorrow passed through him and vanished, and he sat there whole and empty, begone, the filth of sorrow, into the pool, be clean. But there was still work to do. In the days that followed, spring roared in like a wild boar, and with it all its tasks. The garden was as he had found it the first time, wasted by winter with its dark and soggy matter intact. He dug out the vines and the rotted fruit and mounded them into the moldering heap and tilled the soil deeply with the shovel until the worms appeared to greet the air and the blackbirds appeared to pluck the worms. But he did not glean the seeds and corms and fingerlings for replanting. Before harvest, he told himself, I will be gone. In the evenings, he sat by the fire with mother's quilt spread across his knees, sipping some warm brew, trying to penetrate the dense shrouds of forgetting that hung about his mind. Perhaps Bow Wow's spell had left something permanent there. Yes, in fact, that had happened. The seers in free land gathered around holding hands, but then he would find himself thinking something else, some bit of work he had left unfinished that day. The disorder in the root cellar, the loose porch board, the squeaky pump handle. Yes, it was like Bow Wow's spell had left a residue. So much of the story slipped and only woke in drifted, formless dreams. 2 moons passed, and summer moved in to fulfill the promise of spring. A stranger appeared on a warm afternoon. Johnny was out digging weeds from the garden plot when he saw the man round the crest of the western ridge, no more than a speck from that distance, like an oak tree walking. The stranger stomped the road dust off his boots when he reached the house. He was mostly dressed in rags, but he had the distinguishing red armband of a messenger, and he wore a fine leather hat. Johnny recognized him at once. A few new wrinkles, some sprinkled gray in his beard. He was the same messenger who brought the news of Father's death in Johnny's 17th summer. "If you be looking for my mother, she has passed." Messenger shook his head. "I be looking for Johnny Arcane. Believe that be you." He went inside and sat at the table. Johnny gave him a tall glass of water and an oat cake from the morning's breakfast. The messenger reached in his pocket and produced a tattered envelope. Johnny glanced at the wax seal. It was broken. "A woman of interest in Kincorn," said the messenger. "If you like, I'll step outside while you read." Johnny waved his hand. No, stay. It's cool in here." His fingers trembled as he pulled the letter from the envelope. It was written on linen paper with an amber shade and the faint scent of lavender. The words were few and scrawled in large letters. "Johnny, we have found you. You are alive. Cornfest is next moon. Please come. Bearclaw will tell you I am." The last two words were crossed out. The letter continued. "We are both still in love with you, Aunt." The messenger waited long enough for Johnny to read the letter 3 times. "If you wish to return a greeting, I can wait till you write it." Johnny set the letter down on the table. No, stay with me a while." He looked around at the sconces, the curtains, the cluster of lilac he had placed in the vase on the counter the night before. "This house," he said, "tomorrow I will leave it. It will be empty. You can live here if you want." Messenger chuckled. "I know I not be needing a house. I've been a sojourner for so many seasons to stop now. But I'll be sure to inform the others along the way."